morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're tuning in. I'm excited to clarify some things today. So we have some people filing in here. I'm going to start in another minute here. So let's get ready. I'm excited. Oh, well, that wasn't supposed to happen. Let's go back to the beginning. But today is an important webinar. And we're going to be clarifying, I think, a lot of misconceptions that have been going around within our mining community, and we'll get things clarified up so everybody can understand how things are moving forward. And today's topic is going to be our penalty guidelines. So the main conversation today is going to be about our penalties. So just a brief overview of who I am. My name is Joseph, and I work on the business development team here at Computecoin. I work to onboard new miners, assist existing miners. I also help to just develop the operations and make sure the workflow is much easier here, and that everybody has a clarification and an understanding of what their role is. So it's important to note that we still are on our testnet, right, Huygens. And the purpose of this testnet is to verify our tokenomics. And within that, it's also to verify our penalty system and our reward system, right? So these changes are happening, or the changes that have had or have happened, it's all a part of the process in ensuring that when we get to mainnet, not only can we provide the right incentive structure for miners, but we need to make sure that any malicious machines that want to join our network have a de-incentivization structure, right, to not maliciously attack our network. So let's get right into it. I'm going to move this over here because it's in my way. And we'll make it small. Okay. All right. So a question people may be wondering is, when will my machines receive penalties, right? It's a good question to ask. And there's 4 scenarios that your machine will receive penalties. Okay, so your machine can either be offline, a machine could be faulty, a machine could be disconnected early, or what we call an early disconnect, or your account could be frozen for malicious reasons. Now, as we go through these slides, there will be kind of 3 subjects that will ask and go over. And within each section, we'll go over when the error can occur. Okay, so how can the error occur? So how can a machine be offline? How can a machine be faulty? How can a machine receive an early disconnect? How to fix it. So how to fix if my machine is offline. And the penalties occurred if it's not fixed. So we'll get right into this. So an offline machine, along your way, you may see that a machine is offline. So when does this specific problem occur? Well, an offline machine will occur if Huygens has not received a machine's heartbeat for 10 minutes. So what this means is our network is actively scanning, right? Machines in the network are actively communicating with each other every single 10 minutes. So if Huygens doesn't receive that a machine is online, or doesn't receive a heartbeat from the machine, then it's going to peg this machine as offline. Okay. So another way a machine could be offline is if the machine hardware ID changes, right? The system cannot identify the current machine and refuses to receive heartbeats. So we'll dive further into that. So if you were to fix this, you could restart the machine, right? So restart the machine. You could do run the command ccn machine stop, and then to restart it or re-get it on the network, run ccn machine start. And if the machine hardware ID is the same as the machine, and the machine is, it'll come back onto the network as normal. If the machine ID has changed. The hardware ID has changed. And this is important to note. There's a difference between the machine identification and the machine hardware identification. So what we have here is a scenario of, let's just say our machine goes offline and we determine that it's in fact, a Ethernet port, the actual internet connection coming in. So it's your PCIe Express, internet port coming in, and it needs to be replaced. So we replace the whole motherboard of the machine. That means our machine, ID is actually going to be different, right? So the hardware ID of the machine is going to peg off as a different number or a different string of whatever it is. So in that, in that case, we're going to have a command to replace this actual ID. And that replacement is CCN machine replace -I machine ID. Now, when this happens, it's going to check and ensure that the worker address, the client type, and the rest of the configurations are the same. So this is under the assumption that, let's just say the motherboard is faulty, you're still using the same configuration under your GPU, your CPU, or your storage. It's gonna recognize those and understand that, hey, the motherboard had to be swapped out. All we have to do is replace this machine ID. It's just this hardware ID that has been changed because this motherboard has changed, but it's still going to come onto the network. So this would be the case in which we would get an offline machine right back online. And there could be, if you experience issues on this, it's a pretty seamless process. Hop into the Discord and let us know any issues that you're experiencing. But note that it is very, very, very important, right, to make sure that everything else is consistent with what the machine previously had. That this is only, if that machine ID changes, the worker address still has to be the change. You can't start off with a CCN Mini and then change it to a CCN Pro. That's going to peg off some issues, and you won't be able to fix it that way. Everything has to be consistent in the same with the previous settings before the machine went offline. So what are the penalties that you'll receive? So the first thing to note is that you will have a grace period for any offline machine for 72 hours, about 3 days. After the 72nd hour, the 1 hour after, so the 73rd hour, penalties will start to occur. And after 14 days of staying offline, the machine will automatically disconnect, okay? And when you automatically disconnect, it'll receive an early disconnect penalty. So you'll get kind of, you're gonna wanna pay attention to your machines. If you're not, that's gonna be kind of an issue. And remember, the purpose of this is to ensure that the quality of service and your uptime is always relevant, right? Because you're providing a service to a customer that's using this for a real world use case. So below are some of the mathematics, and the Git book will be updated. And along with the Git book, we could have much easier visual charts to understand really what's going on here. But simply put, the equation is very simple. To understand what your penalty will be for an offline machine, it equals your estimated mining rewards times 2.4. And below that, we have our estimated mining rewards, which is your machine's meta power. So the meta power that's being provided multiplied by the machine's latest reward coefficient. You may say, well, what's that? And below, we have a definition of what's that. The machine's latest reward coefficient is depending on the percentage of collateral that you have posted. So if you post 15%, you're only getting 10% of the reward. Right, post 100%, you're getting 100% of the reward. So that will be your offline penalty. Hypothetically here, if you're getting one CCN a day, right? That's your estimated mining rewards. You times that number by 2.4. So in this case, your penalty would be 2.4. It's as simple as that. Obviously, it scales up. If that number is different, it could be 1.5 CCN. he could be earning 100 CCN a day. So, and it's per machine. So, you know, it's not going to give you a penalty for everything. It's only the one machine that's experiencing an issue. Cool. So our next scenario is when a machine could be faulty. So when does this occur? As long as the hardware ID doesn't change, the machine will be considered as faulty. So in our previous example, we replaced our motherboard, which triggered a hardware ID change. In this case, the hardware ID doesn't change, right? So the motherboard is still the same. But our heartbeat detected that the hard disk of the machine, the GPU or CPU or memory resources have decreased by more than 10%. So what does this mean? When our heartbeat is happening every 10 minutes, in this case, it notices, hey, the number of cores that your GPU is providing, or the number of cores that your CPU is providing, or whatever you entailed you were going to be providing has decreased by more than 10%, right? Or the CPU or GPU type changes. So, faulty machines, I would say, are a little bit more easier to deal with. It'll basically determine that, hey, you've had a decrease in the resources that you said you were going to provide. So if you could just check this out. And how do you fix it? So the first thing you need is the info of the machine. And you want to make sure that you're running the latest version of CCN. So you will have to restart the daemon in the process. So let's kind of go over a quick scenario here. The first thing you're going to do is run a command called CCN machine info. And it'll give you all the information on the machine. Okay. And on the online interface, you could determine how much you are supposed to be actually dedicating. And then in the CCN machine info, you'll get your real-time information of what you're providing. So if there's a difference within those numbers or an altercation within those numbers, then you could determine where the issue is. So querying the machine information, you could return the latest machine information in machine hosting information by default. And that's running that query above, CCN machine info. Now restarting the machine, we have this command now, CCN machine renew. Again, if the machine hardware ID doesn't change and just the machine's resources have been readjusted, maybe you've added more resources, maybe a RAM stick popped up and needs to be popped back in, you'll just simply run CCN machine renew. And if you have to restart the daemon process, it's as simple as just doing CCN daemon stop, and then a little prompt's going to pop up and say, hey, when you stop this service, you won't be earning rewards anymore. You'll simply type yes to that or Y, and then you could just rerun by typing in CCN daemon. And then what we have is replacing the machine under the same machine ID. So what this allows you to do is it allows you to replace a machine under the same machine ID. So simply put, you may want to actually just replace this machine in general, or it hasn't detected that you actually had some changes to the resources. So in this case, you would run this command. Now, it is okay to have more than the allocated resources that you actually said you were going to put. So let's just say we had a contract with the system that we had some AMD CPU that was providing 4 cores. My machine is now faulty. For some reason, it's showing that one of the cores is failing, and now I'm only providing 3 cores. In this case, let's say I have the ability to swap out that CPU for a new one. I could swap out that CPU, and this new CPU provides 8 cores. Now, in this case, we would have 4 additional cores that are on the network. And this won't cause any issues. As long as it returns back to 4, even though there's 4 additional, the faulty machine error would be fixed. And it's up to you if you want to readjust that number to provide the additional 4 CPU cores. But in this case, we fixed the original issue, which machine was faulty because it was only providing 3 cores. Now we're back to 4. And as a plus, we have an additional 4 that we could adjust and provide additional meta power if wanted. So what penalties will you receive? Again, when experiencing a faulty machine, you'll have that grace period again of 72 hours. So 3 days to get it fixed. You will have an auto disconnect after 72 hours of staying faulty. It's a one-time penalty of the disconnection. So after the 72 hours, what that means is you'll face that early disconnect if you don't get this faulty machine fixed. So this error is a little bit easier to fix because you could determine what the issue is. An offline error may require you to actually order a whole nother motherboard, or there could be much more bigger issues at play there. Let's go on to the next one. Our third scenario here is a machine that gets disconnected early. Okay, so a machine could get disconnected early if it's faulty for more than 72 hours, or if it's offline. Let's go back to it. Or if it's offline after 14 days, okay? So when does this occur? Machines that get disconnected before the 360-day mining period. So any machines that get disconnected before the contract is up, basically, will experience this early disconnection error. So miners and/or workers voluntarily disconnect machines in advance. That's one way this could happen. Again, machines stay offline after 14 days, or machines stay faulty after 3 days. Bonding machines will also receive the same penalties. As a note, right? If you have your machines in the bonding pool, that doesn't mean you don't receive penalties. You're receiving the same penalties. So that is how this error occurs. And how does it get fixed? Simply reconnect the machines. It is recommended to delete the machine and then reinitialize the machine. In this case, the process is very simple. If you notice that your machine or you disconnected a machine early, you're going to have to reconnect and get that machine back online. So if you do have any errors, it's obviously of utmost urgency and importance to ensure that you don't face this early disconnection fee, because the penalties you will receive will be a little bit more greater than the previous ones. So this early disconnection fee is a one-time penalty. And I know the math can be a little bit complicated, but within the Git book, we could provide a much more easy visual. And I'm going to do my best to break this down here. So the penalty amount has a minimum of 10 days and caps at a maximum of 60 days. And we could see here our early disconnect penalty equals, and it has an equation. You see everything is times by 24, but that's just by, all we're doing there is making it, by the hour. So that's why 24 exists. So again, we have our estimated mining rewards, which is in that formula, which is similar to our previous equation. And then we have our variable H, which is the hours a machine has been connected to Huygens. Again, that coefficient depends on the amount of collateral that you have posted. So very briefly, let's kind of go over how the minimum and maximum and the cap works on this penalty. What we have here is, as your machine is accumulating, you have 10 days it's connected. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, you get to 10 days. You get to 11 days, 13 days, 14 days. Picture on a graph, you have the amount of days a machine is connected, and then the amount of mining rewards that you're receiving. Those are our two variable here that actually count. At 60 days, this mining penalty gets capped. So if you're on the network for 61, 62, 63, 64, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, 359, it's capped at 60 days if you get that early disconnection fee. So it doesn't go over that 60 days. So what that means is you may have a line that's going up, 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 but then it flatlines eventually. The only variability will actually be the amount of estimated mining rewards that you're getting, which could fluctuate depending on the network. So simply put, I actually have a little card here. The visual will look something along like this. If you could see this, when you get to the 60th day, it'll actually flatline out. So that is understood. Now, our fourth scenario is when an account is frozen. And how can an account be frozen? Well, when the network notices that a miner who is maliciously trying to cheat, endanger network security, including but not limited to connecting virtual machines, their account will automatically be frozen. And the only way to get over this, it's not something that you could personally fix as a miner. You will have to get in touch with us. So basically what you have to do is submit a appeal if you think that you have been misjudged. So it's recommended you use the Discord ticketing system, or you could email out to admin@computecoin.com, and proofs will be required for you to appeal. If the appeal is approved, then we will unfreeze the miner's account. Now this is only for if you're actually coming on and doing malicious things, that account will be frozen instantaneously. Again, and you'll have to submit proofs on whether your malicious behavior was valid or invalid or not. Now, what penalties will you receive? So if you have a frozen account, miners will not be able to withdraw funds. They cannot connect or disconnect machines. They will not have the ability to add or remove additional worker accounts. Offline machines would still be auto disconnected after 14 days and still face offline and early disconnect penalties. So that is a big issue. And what this really says here is don't come onto our network for malicious reasons, or else you're going to face, heinous penalties, as you should. So those are the four scenarios in which you could occur some issues. The two ones you may experience, the one you may experience the most frequently is a faulty machine. And the first thing to always check is to just make sure that your machine is up to date. Sometimes it could just not be up to date and it just needs an update. And obviously we'll always have documentation and ensure that there's communication whenever there is an update to ensure that your machine is up to date. Or you can experience an offline machine, right? Maybe something's going on with the internet, or maybe something internally is going on with the hardware and you have to actually replace the motherboard. So I hope this was helpful. And then again, once we have our Discord, our Gitbook documentation updated, I'll ensure that the notification is within Discord. That's the way we're relaying most of our information here. And if I could create a calculator, I will definitely do so. So it was a pleasure, and I wish you all well. Cheers.